Hey everyone, and welcome to another JavaScript tutorial. And in this one, I'm going to show you how to build Minesweeper. So up here, this is the actual application we're going to be building. So if you don't know how Minesweeper actually plays, basically you have a grid. In this case, we have a 10 by 10 grid. And mines or bombs are randomly placed around the grid. So the player has a choice of selecting one of these cells. And if you select it, it's going to show you the number of mines that are adjacent. So we have 8 adjacent cells, and 3 of these are bombs. So if I go over here and try to click something else, in this case, I clicked one that has no bombs that are adjacent to it. So what it does is it's going to go ahead and flood fill the board up until it hits cells that are adjacent to bombs. And of course, you can keep on playing until you hit a bomb or you solve the entire board. And in that case, I just hit a bomb, the game's over, and it reveals the board for us. And then if I hit OK, it's just going to go ahead and restart the game for us. So super straightforward. It shouldn't be too hard to implement. Let's go ahead and try to implement this on the left here. And of course, this will be on GitHub, so I'll paste a link to the GitHub project if you wanted to grab this and play around with it yourself. All right, so starting off, we have a HTML file. I'll show you my project structure. I have an index file, a main.js file, and a style.css file. And main.js is empty, and style just has this font family included. But basically, inside our index HTML file, we are including jQuery here on line 8. So you should know how to include scripts externally. We're including a web font, which we're using to kind of display this Minesweeper web font. And then we are also including font awesome, and that's going to be used for displaying the bomb icon. And of course, in our body, we have an H1 for the title, Minesweeper. We have a div with an ID of board, which is where we are going to display our Minesweeper game. And then, of course, we're including our main.js here so that we can run our JavaScript logic and interact with this Minesweeper board. So to start off, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write a function which is going to create that n by n grid for us. So what we can do is if I were to go ahead and just go to main.js, we want to go ahead and just grab that board div. So I can say const board is equal to money sign using jQuery. I can grab the DOM element with the ID of board. And then we can just go ahead and write a function called create board. And that's going to take a row and column count. So if we wanted to create a 10 by 10 board, we just go ahead and call it down here like so. So create board 10 by 10. And we want this function to kind of create a bunch of rows and columns inside that div here. So if you see my previous videos, it's pretty easy to do. The first thing we can do is we could simply just do a for loop. So I can say let I, or for let I equals 0, I less than rows, and then I plus plus. In fact, I might want to rename this to rows and columns or calls. So for each row that we loop over, we want to create a new DOM element. So I can say const row is equal to money sign, pass it the DOM element div. And I'm going to go ahead and add the class of row to that. And if I were to go and inspect the elements here, we should be seeing, go ahead and close out of that. We should be seeing inside the body, inside the div, we have a bunch of, actually, I forgot to do something. So on line 5, we're creating the row. I forgot to append the row to the board. So I can say board.append and then go ahead and pass it the row. So now we have in the board element, we have 10 rows now. And then the second part of this is we need to do another for loop. So I'm going to go ahead and just loop over the columns. So for let j equals 0, j less than calls, j plus plus. Go ahead and create a column. And then kind of the same logic as before, we're going to add a class called column, or just call in this case. And of course, we need to append that column to the row, and then the row is going to be appended to the board. So then down here, we now have 10 rows, and then inside each row, we have a column. So right now, we're not actually seeing any results, and that's because we haven't really styled the rows or the columns. So let's move over to our style.css, and let's go ahead and start declaring some styles. So since we kind of want to style the columns or the cells, we can just go ahead and do .col. which is going to be styling all of these elements here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and just give it a fixed width and height. So I'll say width of 50 pixels, height of 50 pixels, and I'll say background color of, I'll give it EEE. Save that, and we have all the columns in a single column here, which we can simply fix by just giving it display of inline block here. So now we have those 10 rows in each side, or inside each row we have those 10 columns. Now let's continue to style this so it looks a little bit better. We could probably, let's see, if we wanted to get rid of this white space, we could just go like this and say font size for the rows is equal to 0 pixels. That'll get rid of that white space that was kind of padding in between those rows. For the entire board, I can give it a border of 1 pixel solid and give it like 3. Also want to give that display inline block so that I don't have this extra space over here. So display is inline block. And I can just go ahead and text align everything center here. Okay, so now we have Minesweeper is kind of centered. We have this board. We don't actually have a way to view the different grids. So let's go ahead and add a border. So I can say border right is EE for all of the columns. Oh, I forgot to say 1 pixel solid white. Let me do that instead. Okay, so we added a white border to the right, and we're going to add a white border to the bottom of all these. So now we have a 10 by 10 grid, which is very apparent to see. That's a pretty good start. So to keep on adding on to this, basically what we want to do is there's kind of 2 states to the cells. The first state is like a hidden state, which we want to have some different styles. And then of course, the state where it's not hidden will be just the plain call. So let's go back to our main.js file and add another class called hidden to all of these columns. And we can start styling those kind of differently depending if they're hidden or not. So here I can say .call.hidden, and I can just go ahead and start adding a couple of different things to it. So I can say background color of, I'm going to say 59 AEC7, which is a nice blue. Give a cursor pointer. So when we hover over stuff, we have the pointer cursor. And we can probably give it a hover color. So I can say call hidden hover, give it a different background color. In this case, I'll just give it that EEE. So now as we hover, make sure I save that. Okay. Cool. So if we hover over the cells now, we actually get the color to change. And that's kind of to indicate to the user where they're about to click. A couple of things we could probably fix here is you notice there's a white border at the bottom and then also another white border over here. You can kind of fix that by just saying call colon of, actually I can do row, the last child in the row, and then that column, I could just say border bottom is none. And that went ahead and just removed that border bottom from down here if you saw that or not. And then we can do the same thing, but for the column. So the last column in each row, what we want to do is just give it none for border right. And that fixes that little issue. So pretty awesome. And there's probably some other styles we can add in a bit, but I think we're making some good progress and this is a good state. So let's go ahead and try to actually start implementing some logic. So now that we have the board, what we want to do is we can start adding an event listener for whenever we click on one of those hidden columns on the board. So after we create the board, I'm just going to go ahead and say board.on and add an event listener. So whenever there's a click event, then give it a selector on a column that has a class hidden. And again, this is the listener you want to attach, and then this is the selector you want to kind of filter with. And this is, of course, like a jQuery method.on. And then finally, we're going to call a callback function. And if we were to go ahead and just print out what this is equal to, or money sign of this, we can actually get the reference to the object that we clicked. So notice that every time we click, we get the object that was clicked. And before we kind of go too much further, let's kind of take a step back and try to figure out what we're doing or what we could do first. And the first thing we could do is remember we need to randomly spawn some bombs on this board. So up here, when we're creating the grid, we can just go ahead and say if math of random is less than some percentage, so I'll say 10%, just go ahead and add another class called bomb to the column. In fact, I'll call it mine and save that. And if I go here and give, let's see, call of mine, I can just give that a background color of like red for now, just so we can kind of visualize that and debug it. Not seeing any mines being added. Oh, there it is. Let's see. Call hidden mine. So maybe I need to do that. Okay. So that basically is just showing us where these different mines are. Cool. So step one is we have these mines kind of attached to the columns or cells. What we want to do is if we click on one of these columns and it has the class of mine, we want to go ahead and just end the game and say the player has lost. So at this point, I can just go ahead and say cell is equal to money sign of this. And I can say if cell.has class of mine, we could just go ahead and say game over. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it a boolean false to know that we lost. So of course we don't have a function called game over, so let's go ahead and create one and say is when. So if this is true, we're gonna print out a message, and if it's false, we'll print out a different message. So the first thing we can do is let's just go ahead and define a message. So I'll say let message is equal to null, and I'll say if is when message is going to equal to u1, and then otherwise message will equal to you lost. And of course, we could just go ahead and print out that alert. And let's see what happens. So at this point, if we were to click on a blue square, it should do nothing. If we click on a red square, it says you lost. And what we could do at this point is we could probably say, let's restart the game once they click that OK button. So to do that, we're just going to go ahead and wrap this in a set timeout. That's a function. And we want to print out the alert and then call a method called restart, which we haven't created yet. And basically, I'll show you what this is useful. Like, why are we doing a set timeout here? In fact, we don't even need that right now, so I'll just go ahead and go back. So I'll create this function game over like so. And when we restart, since we don't have restart declared, basically we're just going to recreate the board, give it a 10 by 10. And up here, we probably need to do board.empty just to clear out all the DOM elements. And down here, I could say create board, or I could just call restart actually. Cool, so now every time we lose and we click OK, the board is just going to restart and we can kind of play over again. So we kind of took care of the case where the player lost. Let's go ahead and take care of the case where if they click on an empty slot, what do we do to kind of reveal the board behind the scenes? So here, if the cell does not have the class of mine, what we can do is we can just call a method called reveal. And I'm just going to go ahead and use like row and column or INJ. So at this point, we want to pass an INJ here, but we don't have that declared. So I'll say row and column. And up here, we just go ahead and declare those. So row is equal to cell.data of row, which we're going to declare in a second. And then same thing with column. And the cool thing about attributes in jQuery is you can attach attributes here. So every time we create a column, remember in create board, we create these column elements. I can just go ahead and go attribute and then say data column is equal to j and data row is equal to I. So what this allows us to do is every time we click on one of these cells, if I go back to my console, it's going to print out the I and J location of where we clicked. And of course, we're getting an error because reveal is not defined yet. So let's go ahead and declare a function called reveal, which takes in a original I and original j. In fact, I'll just call it O of I and O of j. Probably not the best names, but we can rename them in a second if we need to. All right, so for this step, basically, we want to start revealing the spot that we clicked on and then continuously traverse to the neighbors, reveal those spots if they're not mines, and then continuously keep doing that. So this is a good example of when we should probably do like a depth first search or a breadth first search. And I'm just going to do a depth first search and have like a scene array to keep track of where we've been. So this may be a little bit advanced, but if you know about recursion or you know about depth first search or breadth first search, this probably won't be too confusing. So starting off for reveal, we need to keep track of where we've been. I'm going to say create a new map called scene. And then I'm going to create a helper function inside here with an I and a j. And that's kind of just to keep track of where our recursion is going. And I'm going to call the helper with our original I and j down here. And so what we want this recursive function to do is basically we keep traversing all adjacent locations until we have reached a spot that has an adjacent mine. So the base case of this recursive function would be if I is out of bounds. So in this case, I need to like set it if I is greater than or equal to rows, which I don't think we defined. So I say const rows is equal to 10, const calls is equal to 10. And then down here, I could say rows and I could say calls. And then now we have those kind of global constants, which we can just check. So I can say if I is greater than or equal to rows, or j is greater than or equal to calls, or I is less than 0, or j is less than 0. We can just go ahead and return out of that helper function. And then otherwise, we need to keep track of where we are. So I'm going to make a new key. And I'm going to say that's going to be a string that has the variables I and j in it. And then we can say if we've already seen this spot, so if scene of key, let's go ahead and return. We kind of have another base case here. This is to prevent it from just continuously checking and checking and checking the same spots over and over again. So after we've done these base cases, basically what we want to do is grab the cell that we're currently at. So luckily we can use jQuery to kind of use selectors to help us find those. So I can say cell is equal to money of the class column, which also has hidden, and then find me ones that have the attribute of row is that, and data column is equal to the j that's passed in. So we're checking and finding the columns that match this I and j, which will be one of these 10 by 10 cells. And at this point, we don't have a function to kind of figure out how many adjacent mines there are, but I'll just say const mine count is equal to 1. And if, well, let me actually take a step back. So basically, we continuously search using depth first search until we hit a spot that doesn't have a mine and it isn't hidden. So what we can do here is just, first of all, return if either of those are true. So if the cell that we're at, so money sign cell, has class of hidden, or does not have the class of hidden, or the cell that has a class of mine, we know that we don't need to kind of traverse that spot anymore. So here I could just say return. And then if we've already seen it, we could just go ahead and remove the class hidden. So now it'll become a white square. So this will make the square white. And then if this cell that we're at has mines surrounding it, so I'll say const mine count is equal to 0 for now. And then to do, we can fix this. So we can say if the mine count is actually positive, what we want to do is set the text of that to the mine count. And then return. And this is going to kind of stop it from traversing further once we hit a spot that has a number in it. And then lastly, in our recursive function, we basically just need to keep on checking all the adjacent spots. So we could easily do that with a double for loop, which we just go from -1 to +1. I'll loop di direction and I'll loop in the dj direction. And then I'll just recall this helper function by just adding I to di and adding j to dj and then call helper. And that will continuously do the recursive function until we've reached an in spot. So just to kind of test out what's going on, let's just go ahead and click this and notice how it kind of flood filled and emptied the entire board. And that's because we haven't yet implemented this mine count. Because then once we've done the implementation, it should stop when it hits places which are kind of adjacent to mines. So let's go ahead and write that function now. So let's pretend that there is a function called get mine count we pass in an I and a j. And we need to go ahead and kind of implement that function. So I'll say get mine count of I and j. And what this function needs to do is we basically just need to count out the number of mines which are adjacent or surrounding the original cell that we clicked. So here I can just keep track of something. So I'll say let count equal to 0. Again, I'll do this double for loop action that we did here so we can check all of the adjacent cells. Of course, we need to get the new location that we're going to check. So we can say const new I is equal to I plus dj. Const new j is equal to j plus dj. Actually, that should be di, my bad. And then, of course, make sure we're not out of bounds. So I'll say if ni is greater than equal to rows, or nj is greater than equal to calls, or nj is less than 0, or ni is less than 0. We just go ahead and continue. In fact, I'll just do that here. Okay. And then otherwise, we're at a valid spot. Let's just go ahead and grab that cell, which we can do the exact same code. Copy pasta that right there. Instead of I and j, we need to check the new I and the new j because that's what we've been doing right here. And basically, if the cell has a mine, which we know we can just do as class mine, we just need to do count plus plus. And then down here, let's go ahead and just return the count and see what happens. Oh. Okay, so let's do a little bit of debugging, see what's going on here. Okay, so I think this is an issue with style. So basically what we need to do is we need to just vertical align all these. So vertical align top. That'll fix our issue. And then also we have a number 1 in here, but I think the color is not necessarily set to what it should be. So if I do color of black, maybe it'll show up. Let's see. Oh, I don't think it's showing it because we set the font size to 0 for the row. So over here, we can say font size is equal to 20 pixels and save that. And also give it a line height equal to the height of the actual element. So I'll say 50, and that'll align it center. Cool, so let's refresh this and just kind of redo what we just did. So now when I click on a spot, it's going to flood fill out, and it's going to set all of these slots which have an adjacent mine. All right, so that's working. And if we click on a slot that only has like nothing adjacent to it, then we just kind of reveal it and just put the number in it. So yeah, at this point, we basically implemented the whole get mine count and the reveal functionality. So what we need to do now is basically if the player goes through the whole board and kind of beats the game, we need to go ahead and show that alert saying that they won. So after we call reveal, so remember here after we click on a column, we call reveal. And then after we revealed, we could just say const is game over. And then check the amount of hidden elements. and verify to see if it's equal to the number of mines. And if it is equal, then we know the game is over and that the player has won. So I can say game over of true. Save that and just go ahead and test it out. So it should give us an alert. Boom, you won, and then the game should restart. Awesome. So some other interesting things we could probably add is once the game's over and you won, or if you lose, we just want to go ahead and just reveal the entire board. So if we go to our game over function, what we want to do is grab everything that's hidden, or grab everything that's a mine, and just go ahead and append a font awesome icon to it. So I can say grab me everything that's a column and it has the class mine, and just go ahead and append a new element of I that has a class of, I'll say FA bomb. So if I save this and test it out, in fact, if I just lose the game, it should do that. Let's see. I think this is why we use the set timeout, because for whatever reason, the moment that alert comes up, it's going to block the thread and nothing's going to display. So I'm going to do a set timeout of like a second. Save that. And if I lose the game, hold on. There we go. So after a second, it'll go ahead and just print out that you have lost message. Okay, so that's going to show a bomb if the player lost. And so what we could do here is just say, let the icon equal to null. And then if the player won, we could say icon is equal to a flag. So if a flag, and if the player lost, make the icon equal to a bomb. So now at this point, if I were to save this and verify that if I were to beat this Minesweeper game, it should show flags in all the red spots. Cool. And then same thing, if I lose, it's going to show bombs in all the spots. No problem. And then another thing we want to do is for everything that was hidden and wasn't a mine. So I'll say call of not mine. What we want to do is go ahead and change the HTML of that. And I can actually do jQuery and pass a function. And then basically just get the number of adjacent bombs that are to that cell. So again, I could just say get mine count, the cell of data of row and of column. Because remember, we just call this with an I and a J, and that'll give us how many mines are surrounding that cell. And then we can just go ahead and return what the count was. Okay, so now if I were to lose, boom, it shows the account for everything. In fact, it's showing 0. I don't want to show 0, so what we could do is just say here if count is equal to 0, display an empty string, otherwise display count. A quick little fix there. Boom. Okay, awesome. And then finally, we just want to remove all of those hidden classes because the game is now over. Everything is displayed, and we don't need any of those hidden columns to exist anymore. So I can say call of dot hidden, remove class of hidden. Go ahead and save that. So game's over. It's going to reveal everything. Boom. Cool. And as for some finishing touches, pretty sure this is basically all done. What we could do is add some transition to these little columns so that as we hover, the background color changes slowly. And then of course, we don't care to kind of show the player where the mines are. So I'll go ahead and remove that. So now when I were to click, everything will slowly transition. It just looks a little bit better. Cool. So that's basically Minesweeper. I mean, this is one way to do it. There's probably other ways you can do To make this more efficient, like we could probably have a 2D grid which keeps track of the mines and the adjacent spots and whatnot. But I decided to just kind of do this all using the DOM elements and attaching attributes to it. So maybe it's not the best approach, but hey, it gets the job done. So pretty cool stuff. Be sure to leave me comments and feedback if you thought this tutorial was pretty cool. And also give me a thumbs up and subscribe. All right, thanks for watching. And again, I'll post the link to this project on GitHub below. So read the description if you wanted to clone this project and kind of try it out for yourself.